Hey everyone, I'm so excited to have my good friend Jude Blereau with me today. Hey Jude, I feel like I'm going to sing.
Oh, Joe, we haven't caught up for so long. It's so good to be here. And hello to each and every single one of you here on this podcast. It's really lovely to meet you.
Everybody probably knows you, but just in case they don't, Jude is a very experienced whole food cook. I call her the whole food guru of Australia. And how many? You've got 5 cookbooks now, Jude, is it?
5 cookbooks, yeah. That was 5 was enough.
Yeah, and they are not just your regular cookbook. They are like,
Definitely.
You go back to them for research. Like,
I'm such a big believer and have always been, is like, you need to know what, but more important than what is you need to know why of the what.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then the how.
Yes.
And so a lot of my readers will notice that I don't have a whole lot of pictures or photos, not as gorgeous photos and many as you have in your beautiful because I want to spend time telling people why. And I have to tell you that in all of my books, probably about a half of them are edited out because there's so many words.
I know. It's so hard to get the words down.
Like.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And these are big, thick books. Guys, if you haven't seen Jude's books, you need to go and have a look at her website, which is, what's your website again?
Wholefoodcooking.com.au.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you'll find them on there. But yeah, award-winning cookbooks. There's just so much just basic common sense stuff in there, but also there's science behind baking and, trying to, you get as food writers and recipe developers, we get the questions all the time about baking fails or, different things. And Jude addresses a lot of that in her books, just because once you understand the science behind how something works or the why, then you can figure it out for yourself.
Makes such a big difference. And it's what empowers that person to go on and be successful.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think there's a couple of things I just want to kind of say there is that it's a really wonderful thing that dear listener, you should be so proud of yourself that you are wanting to make changes for the better in nourishing yourself and those you love. But if you have a husband or family, you only have at the most 2, if really 1, chance to do that. So if you're dealing with something new, like, for example, you want to do quinoa, for example, and you cook it and you don't understand all the intricacies of quinoa, and your kids go, oh, and your husband says, oh, that's revolting, it's gone. That chance is gone.
That happened to me with milk kefir with Isaac.
Yep.
One chance, I overdid it. It was too sour and gross. He would not touch it, and this is 5 years later.
Yeah, and you will still be teased about that today.
Yes.
It's kind of and your children are wonderful and exposed to so many fabulous things, but they still kind of use it as a kind of a teasing kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really important. But just a little word on my books is like, I actually think now, because so much was edited out of the books because it has to be, because they can't publish a tome. And the thing that I'm really pleased about now is that in online classes, which I've been doing for about 3 or 4 years now, I can go into so much more depth.
Yeah.
And so much more explanation. And I love being able to do that.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference for people too, as you're cooking and they're watching. The whole time you're doing things, there's little things that you're doing that people go, oh, is that how you do that? Oh, is that, there's so much that you see, not just when you write it down in a book. You can't share everything.
You know that too, Joe.
Yeah.
And my colleague in Sydney, Holly Davis, who I think is equally a whole food guru.
Yes, she is.
She's just a legend. And it's like, we both find that actually when over the many years of teaching face-to-face or online or whatever, it's that sometimes you don't realize what you're doing, that you just do instinctively. For example, one example is when I fry pikelets or fritters or things like that, when I go to turn them over, I instinctively, just subconsciously, lift the pan ever so slightly when I'm putting the little, I've got a lovely little kind of flipper that goes in, and that just helps you ever so gently. You're not lifting it massively, but it just helps you turn the pikelet over that little bit easier. It doesn't have to fall as far. So little things like that.
Yeah, that's right, that you don't even realize that you do.
Exactly.
So good. And I really love about Jude, for those of you who don't know Jude, that she is all about nourishing the body and the soul. And it's like, it's not just the nutrient breakdown in the food. It's the joy, it's the deliciousness, right? It's the traditions, it's the community. And that's something we love to talk about here on the podcast.
And that's what I love about your work too, Jo. But it's that we are not just physical beings.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think we're a spiritual being having a human experience. But even if you don't believe that, nonetheless, you are both. You are a physical body, and you are, you can call yourself an emotional or feeling or spiritual kind of body. And that is entailed in all those things, for example, and recognised in biodynamic farming. And I'm talking about the true biodynamic farming, the Demeter one handed down by Rudolf Steiner. That example, for example, that when you enjoy your meal and you're with good company and you're having your meal in a 3-dimensional setting, not watching TV or having phones, or you're connecting with people and hearing them, right there and then, or etc., that you digest your food so much more. And I'm a really big believer in body and soul, and we look at all the nutrients and all the macro, micro enzymes, phytonutrients, etc., that we need for the physical body to survive, but the soul needs nutrients to survive, and those nutrients are joy and deliciousness.
Yeah, I agree totally. And that brings us to our main topic today, because I really want Jude to talk about the modern idea that sugar and sweet is a dirty word. So what do you think, Jude? Is sweetness a dirty word?
I think sweetness and fat are both dirty words, and I think that's certainly, the fat thing is the post-70s and kind of 60s, 70s in Australia, and then you also see that probably more so in the 80s and 90s, sweetness becoming a really dirty word. And I actually want to go a little bit backwards as well, because I actually think that what we're seeing is this real manifestation of imbalance and the fractionalization of the healthy, natural, whole food kind of world that really you started to see compound in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then in the 2000s, and 2010, and it's only just got worse.
And do you feel like it started with all the food science becoming the cool way forward? Yeah,
definitely. And I think there's lots of studies on that, or lots of writings on that when I think Michael Pollan calls it nutritionalism.
Yeah, that's a good
and that's very much tied in with marketing as well.
Yeah.
In fact, anywhere you want to look these days, I'm getting digressing here, Jo.
No,
but
digress away.
you want to look here, what you're seeing is marketing. It's all about marketing. It's all about sales. It's all about profit, whether it be about early childhood education, which is another passion of mine, whether it be about the medical system, whatever you want to look at. And Michael Pollan talks about it really beautifully, about this nutritionalism, is when they could start saying, oh, you've got this nutrient or that, or it's calcium enriched or things like this, they can make more money out of it and market it. Yeah, and I think that's kind of was a very early kind of stage of it. But nonetheless, where we are is in a situation where some things are good and some are bad. We've lost this perspective of, and I think that also arises from the loss of food culture. And you and I spoke a lot about food culture, which is the wisdoms or the understanding of different areas that help humans stay alive and stay well. So there's shelter culture, how to build. There's fire culture, how to build a fire. There's farming culture. But in food culture, it's like, here's how to eat. Here's how to grow food. Here's how food that is good to grow. Here's how we eat. For example, when I was growing up, you never, ever, I never would have dreamt of having a meal on the run. Never. Even when, if your mum or dad were working, my dad was always home by 5:45, 5:30 to 6, because that was the work day, 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And he had a big job, but families ate together. You didn't have a brownie for breakfast or a piece of toast for breakfast. You had egg or things like that, or porridge, that kind of thing. And that's all, well, it's pretty much all gone. Yeah, it used to be handed down by the churches, used to be handed down by the government. For example, we had raw milk at school when I was at school in my early days in the 50s. And in the United States and England, you see that in the school lunch program, which has gone to crap these days, but nonetheless, that was the principle that was there. And it was handed down in the home. Now, most of that's all gone. And so you get this, there's no grounding, there's nothing tethering anything anymore.
Yeah.
And when you get that, you get this is good, this is bad. And they marketing, writers, books, whatever you want to say, absolutely hammered this idea that saturated fat is evil, cholesterol's evil, and it's entrenched, and that sugar is bad, and that sweetness is bad. And my personal feeling is it's done nobody any favors. I've worked many years doing food coaching, and my average client was women in their 40s that had followed this to the letter, and their bones were shot. They were deeply unhappy in their life, and it was this harsh kind of restrictive kind of diet, and an
intense sort of very stressful, tense kind of way of looking at food, that you've got to do the right thing. Oh no, that's the wrong thing, and now I've messed up, and I feel terrible, and I'm so guilty. And
I tell you something really interesting, and this is, I know, just a little bit off track, but we can come back on track, is just recently in the past 8 weeks, I've seen 2 articles, believe it or not, saying what people have known forever, is that cholesterol is a marker of longevity, especially for women.
Yes, I have been seeing that too.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so many more studies and articles on the importance of cholesterol for brain development and hormones.
It's just great to see.
We are going to have a podcast soon on fats, I think, because I get so many questions about fats. It's fats and sugar. I think that they're just so confusing for people.
They are. I have to tell you, fats are my favourite subject. But
well, I should have just got you. You can talk about fats as well. I don't mind.
Well, let's talk about sugar kind of first. And I think the thing that I'd like to say first of all is that, so my mum passed away, was it not last year, but the year before. She was 100. She probably could have gone on for another few years, but she was very keen to be leaving. Mum was not in her home, but hadn't been out of her home for very long, and she's like, I'm done. But anyway, she and all her generation grew up with really good fundamentals, like eating season because there was no other option. Everything was cooked from scratch, no other option. They sat down to eat. They had good fat in their diet. They ate everything you wanted, food closer to its natural state. All those kind of, the soil was better, all those kind of good foundational things they did.
Yeah.
They were less, they weren't running around like crazy people. They had stress in their life. They had war and etc. But in their diets and in mine growing up, and most women or people of my age, we had white sugar and white flour all the time. We always had cakes in our lunchbox or a biscuit, and we always had dessert. Yeah, it was the only way to kind of feed a growing family.
Yeah.
And most of that generation were healthier than we are today and lived long lives. Yeah, most of that generation lived in their late 90s, hundreds. I know someone who's 107 that's still going strong.
Wow. And also there was much less obesity. So
much less. They had to walk and exercise. They didn't have
natural. Part of life.
Exactly. And I think the thing that I want to say first, and why I say this about sugar, is, and I'm talking, so we're meaning refined cane sugar, because there are lots of other sweeteners. And sure, it doesn't meet our core whole food principle that we want to eat our food as close as possible to its natural state. But when you're having white sugar and white flour in balance and moderation within a good, whole, broad, nutrient-dense diet, and a lot of your other foundational core whole food principles are in place, and mention some of those: eating your food as close as possible to its natural state, eating it as close as possible to harvest, eating seasonally, cooking from scratch, having good soil, not eating, sprayed food. The stuff on glyphosate is just getting worse and worse. It's coming out. Scary. And not eating food full of additives, eating food that your body has developed to understand.
Yeah.
And managing your stress. And not going 100% all the time. That's how nature works. It has seasons. It comes up, it comes down. There's seasons of rest, etc., and sleep and all those other issues. I absolutely don't have an issue with white sugar and refined white flour, but I prefer not to eat. I just want to say that first up. I think we need to be focusing more on getting other fundamentals in place than going, oh my God, sugar's bad. Oh, yeah. Remember the I quit sugar? That's so damaging for so many people, because that is a perfect example of if you are working 14 hours a day or so, like that person was, in a very high-powered job, working most 7 days a week, grabbing food just from takeout or whatever and eating it, it's like, duh, things are going to go astray. It's not necessarily the sugar that's it's not great. It's definitely not optimal, but I'd really love to take that burden of guilt off people. If you can focus more on getting some of your other foundational principles in place, things will even out a bit more anyway. And then you can start progressing. You don't have to do it all at once. And then you can start progressing more to working with semi-refined sweeteners and unrefined sweeteners. But they behave very differently. And that's why when you want to know the what sweetener, the why, and how the heck do I use it? And when it comes to baking, as you know, and I like to say that whole food baking, it's a lot of people say that baking's a science, but when you get into the whole food world, it's kind of like an instinct as well. It's like children. It's like real life. And this is the same with any real, organic, regenerative, biodynamic fruit or vegetables, like every time you use one, it will be different.
Yes.
The sun that was on it in the field, the nutrients in that field, how long it's been harvested, all sorts of things. They're different all the time. And batches of flowers, like the only industry there's standardization is the wheat industry around the world. None of the other flowers, doesn't matter what they are, if they're not wheat, there's no standardization. And what one might be from one supplier, so let's say barley flour. Barley flour in Australia from 4-leaf is going to be different from barley flour from Kyalla. I much prefer the 4-leaf, but you get a recipe and you've got one of my recipes and it's got 1 cup, 110 grams of barley flour that's got more bran and germ in it, and you're using Kyalla, your liquid ratios will be out.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So they're all different.
Yeah.
And with sweeteners, very popular sweetener for people to convert a recipe that you might have done or that I might have done because they want it to be healthier is I've used coconut palm sugar. Yeah, because coconut palm sugar is very in. Yeah, very in. It's in thing. It's on the cover of Vogue, it should be. And but if you replace 1 cup of Rapadura with 1 cup of coconut palm sugar, you are going to have liquidity issues.
Okay.
Because all sweeteners are part of the liquid ratio of your recipe.
Yeah.
And liquidity is really important in whole food baking, because if you don't have enough liquidity in those flours that are heavier and denser than refined white wheat flours that you find in supermarkets, your leavening can't move as freely through the batter. Yeah. And if it's too wet, then you don't have enough flour. You don't have enough flour to absorb that liquidity, and it kind of can rise and collapse.
Yeah.
And so when you replace it with coconut palm sugar, you'll have problems with the leavening moving through the mix, often get tunneling of the leavening. And you'll also, and it will be more crumbly because there's not enough ability for it all to bind together. The starch doesn't have enough liquidity. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not just and this is what I see a lot of people do. Oh my God, and I'm just rambling. I'm sorry.
No,
Jo.
it's interesting. It's so interesting. Keep going.
What was I saying? This is what people, it's like I will post something like I'm sure you've had the experience too, where I post something and they're like, oh, this is great. I'm going to convert it to gluten-free or something like that. And then they post again or email me and say, oh my goodness, didn't work out. And they're just, it's
not straight swaps generally.
Conversion, but everything you do impacts. Yeah.
I have to give you an example. On Monday, I don't know if you saw my Instagram post. On Monday, my sister and I were cooking together, and
I did.
It was so funny.
I smiled.
I said, oh, can you use up all these soggy bananas and just make my chocolate banana cupcakes? She helps me in the kitchen on Mondays to help me basically so I can get a lot done while I'm also doing computer work, but also recipe testing. But this was just an old recipe that always works. And I was like, can you just get rid of these bananas, make a double batch of the grain-free chocolate banana cupcakes. They're also egg-free. They're like one of those recipes that most people can eat, right? And so I make up a heap of them and stick them in the freezer, and they're really fudgy and yummy. They just completely collapsed. And straight away I knew it was too much liquid. And I was like, oh, maybe the bananas were too soggy. But I've used soggy bananas before. And then I'm trying to think what it could have been. And I said, what milk did you use? And usually I use coconut milk, but I make my own from coconut cream. I just add a little bit of water. So it's still quite thick.
Yeah.
She goes, well, I use cow's milk. I'm like, oh, I haven't used cow's milk in those before. And then there was something else. I think it was a different coconut flour than I usually use. Coconut flour really varies. Oh my goodness.
Everything varies.
Everything varies. And then it was, so the bananas were wetter than usual. The milk was probably thinner than usual. The coconut flour was a different texture. And I feel like there was something else. Oh, she used butter instead of coconut oil, which I wouldn't usually think.
Yeah, but see what you've got going on.
So many variables.
Yeah, you only want to convert with one variable.
One variable, yes.
But it's like when you use butter, you've got, so you had less fat in it.
Yeah.
You had probably more liquidity in the bananas, just a little bit. But I think the butter and the coconut oil is the big.
It is. Okay, I didn't think of that because I suppose butter still has some milk milk in it.
Yeah,
20%.
Yeah,
good to know.
20% liquidity can make a big difference.
Yeah, that's really good to know.
Yeah, it's like and swapping oil for butter. So say your recipe got 100 grams of butter, and you want to convert it to and it's got half a cup of milk, whatever milk it is, in that recipe. Then you want to convert using oil. You would do 80 grams of coconut oil and 20 mils extra of milk.
Yes. Because I usually do take the coconut oil down a bit if I'm using that instead of butter.
Yeah, you do. You take it down by about 20%.
But I wasn't watching, and I was just like, yeah, just make that recipe. And she's a slapdash cook like me.
It's real life.
It's real life. It's good for people to see.
Yeah.
And then you go, but I want to know why. I always want to know why. So then I just kept puzzling it out, and I was like, right, now I've got to make it again and just make sure that this is right, because now that I've thought it through. So
and that's what so that's when you get lots of chocolate muffins happening, or let's say in my case probably about the 15th chocolate cake.
Yes. But there's always people willing to take some. So
you know what I've been doing, because I've been doing so many cakes in like checking and converting and everything, and film photography for Whole Food Baking. I've been putting them on my local Buy Nothing group.
That's so cool. Oh man, I wish I lived near you, Jude.
What am I going to do? Well, some of them probably weren't so great when I was doing early conversions of some of them, but yeah.
That's so funny. Now, I always have a constant flow of visitors and kids and friends and cousins and nieces and nephews, and so totally fine. It never lasts long. But yeah, we had a bit of fun with that. So when I really want to talk about fake sweeteners, because when I say sweet isn't a bad word, that doesn't include fake sweeteners, because that is a bad word. And can you just tell us a bit about why?
Well, ultimately, again, what we're doing is coming back to our core whole food principles, okay? And I think my first online class is Revive, Restore, Reset, which is 5 core whole food principles that if you do nothing else, it's like those ones, build a strong food culture, cook from scratch, source your food as close as possible to the person who grows it, eat your food closer to its natural state, choose meals over snacks, okay? 5. And then there's a few more like eat seasonally and, soil and stuff like that. Hang on, I forgot why I was started with that bit.
Well, you start with that before you...
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know why. Okay, so included in that is all about additives, etc. And that eating your food as close as possible to its natural state automatically excludes additives and chemicals. Yeah. It automatically excludes that. It's using what nature provides. Yeah. And that is the skill of cooking. Yeah. That is very rarely taught these days. So natural or wholesome sweeteners include cane sugars. Cane sugars can be refined to just their white natural state, or they can be unrefined, which is just the cane sugar that's expressed from the cane, as you would see lots of up there. And then it's put over heat at a very low heat to evaporate off, okay? Evaporate the liquid off, because wherever there's liquid, if you keep sap, which is what cane sugar is, anything that's got sugar in it, and you keep it in a liquid state, it's going to go moldy. It's going to ferment. So this is what they evaporate off that liquid, so you've got crystals and you can store them. Yeah. But that doesn't have as much liquidity ability in it, because it's got lots of minerals and nutrients and phytonutrients, and it's full of good things as well. Yeah, that's Rapidura or Panella, sometimes called Jaggery, etc. And it's got a very strong molasses flavour. So what's happening in the world for quite some time is that there are these semi-refined sugars, and they are crystallised. So a Rapidura sugar is not crystallised. It's just granules. And so it is still, these semi-refined sugars are still crystallised, but they don't go through like a double crystallization process. They're not bleached. They've got lots more nutrients left in them. And the brand in Australia that we have is Billington's, which is an English company. The Billington's semi-refined sugars are divine, far less sweet than a white sugar, more flavour. They're absolutely beautiful. I love them. So sometimes, let's say I'm doing a Genoise sponge, I want it to be beautiful and fill it with cream and the strawberries that will be coming into season. I don't want heavy flavours in that sponge. I could make it with a Rapidura sugar. It won't have as much rise, but I could do it with that. But I don't want to do that. I want to have a clear, lovely flavour coming through. So I'd use the semi-refined sugar in that case. So that's cane sugars. Then you have, so under the idea of sap sweeteners, so that sap sweeteners, you've got cane sugars, you've got maple syrup. Yeah, beautiful sweetener. Absolutely. It's really great when you're working in a dairy-free or a gluten-free kind of arena, or especially a vegan arena, because some of your flavors can be quite pronounced, and maple syrup really helps to soothe that out. It's got such a fragrant, pretty flavor.
Yeah.
You can also use maple sugar, which is the water evaporated off. So you have these granules. Divine, super expensive in Australia.
Yeah.
So what else have you got in your sap sweeteners? Sorghum you'll probably get in some places in the world, that kind of thing. And then you have your, then you've got your grain sweeteners that are maltose based, like brown rice syrup, which I love, and I highly recommend. The only one brand you use in Australia is Spiral.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be using the Pure Harvest. It's too refined. It's not really much. The Spiral's much closer to its natural state. And that's tricky to use, because that kind of toffee consistency that you see in the jar will not change when it's baked. So it doesn't add liquidity to it, and it will give you a chewy end result and quite a crisp outer end result, which
good
you
for
might
biscuits
want in your sponge. But brilliant.
Sorry, I had to. You're making me hungry.
Go for it. Brilliant, because it's really great too when you've got kind of egg-free situations going on, because it'll help stick things together. Like it's great for muesli bars and stuff like that. There is barley, brown rice syrup or brown rice malt or barley malt, but barley malt's strong. I don't use it.
I remember trying it years ago.
Yeah, me too. Bit much. And then you've got palm sugars, which have been used very traditionally. But there's a real difference between the palm sugars. So you've got palm tree with the sap, kind of, so to speak, which is really dark coloured. And then what coconut palm syrup or sugars is, you can get syrup too, is it's the nectar of the blossom from the coconut palm tree. Nectar is a very different kettle of fish to sap.
Yes.
Yeah, much less liquidity in it, and that's why it when you reduce it down and evaporate off any of the liquid that's there, is a tricky baby to use. It's not highly sweet because it's got some degree of fructose in it as well, and not everybody might want to have fructose in what they're having. Yeah. So that's those, and then you've got fruit juice concentrates, which I'm not mad on for sweetening. So that's the arena.
And honey.
Oh, and honey, forgot. Oh my God, I love honey. Forgot, thank you. Love honey.
Honey's my favorite.
I love it. It's a lot like brown rice syrup in that kind of consistency. I love it, and it gives that little lovely kind of little chew to a product. I love it. But so none of those, they are all wholesome and healthy. And when you're buying really high quality of those, which are more expensive, they're really good sweeteners to use. And indeed, in the natural home of Rapadura, which is Brazil and all those countries, it's considered a really healthful product. They used to, back in the day, make a tonic out of it.
Yeah.
You know? There's nothing wrong with these things in a wholesome and healthy diet.
In the context of everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Life really all about context in so many areas, you know, balance, moderation, context. And so what's not good that's promoted as good because they're not sugar, which is really a very stupid argument, I think, because I think there's no understanding of what sugar is in the first place. It's very similar to salt. You know, salt is evil. Well, if you refine it, take everything away from it, it's not going to do you any good. There's this lack of understanding of what salt really is in the first place.
Yeah.
But things like, I'm sure you're aware of them, like xylitol, horrible product. The sugar alcohols, there's lots of them. Xylitol is one of the sugar alcohols. I saw, what else did I see recently? And I'm going, seriously, it's Letenko or something like that. That's in the supermarket as a sweetener. There's quite a few popping up in the supermarket, which I am there for probably about two things in the supermarket: to get the tea that I like and a couple of other bits. But I don't use any of those. Yeah, you want, basically my kind of feeling is, I was going to say, if you can't make it in your own kitchen, then you probably don't want to be using it, but which is how they've done traditionally Rapadura or maple syrup or coconut palm sugar or tapping trees for sap. You know, that's my feeling, Jo.
Yeah, I'm just muting myself now and then. Sorry, guys, because there's a lot of noise in the background here. But I just really want to know, like, why. Okay, so people are trying to lose weight, for instance.
Yep.
Or they're struggling with diabetes, or, you know, all these different things that are related to the sweeteners in their food. But it's not just related to that, but that's sort of where people go with their thinking. As soon as they think diabetes, they just think, well, take out the sugar and swap it for something that won't affect my blood sugar levels. Or with, you know, losing weight, they straight away think, we'll take out the sugar and just put in a fake sugar. So what would you suggest for these people who just really, you know, I guess that's their focus? Like I always say to people, the sweetener you use really depends on your focus, your health goals, but it also is a matter of, I guess, how much of those sweet things you eat. So you can, anyway, I would love for you to talk about that.
So what I would say to that person, first of all, is that you are treating the symptom and you are not attending to the cause. Okay, it's like if you have water in a river fouling up and you see and you add things into the water to try and fix that up, or you swap what you're putting into the water to fix it up, you're not attending to the problem, which is probably much further downstream, which is a log or something jamming it up. Yeah. And I think this is very much a magic bullet approach of our society. Okay, so I probably just going to leave the diabetes one for a minute, because you would have to address that a lot more slowly, I think. And I think that magic bullet, we want things done overnight. These things don't happen overnight. So for losing weight, I think that what comes into losing weight is denial. So and as soon as you start denying yourself something, you will want it. Yeah. Now, I'm not a losing weight guru, but how I was brought up, like my mum never went past probably a size 12, I don't think. But I have to say that, and I've never had issues with weight. Like I was always like an 8 and 10 until I probably hit menopause. But the last 3 years were really difficult for me, really stressful. There was a lot of difficult situations as my mother really aged and death around. And my digestion I've got the most robust digestion went. Okay. No, and I had that's not what it is. And I had put on quite a lot of weight. And if I try and lose weight, and I'll put it back on again this winter, but come spring, what I am going to do and how I find works for me is that I just keep eating how I eat, but I have a better breakfast, a better lunch, a better dinner. And that's this core whole food principle: choose meals over snacks. If you exist on snacks, you'll put on weight. No two ways about it, because your body's like, when am I going to get my nutrients? I need nutrients to survive. I need fuel. I always have good breakfasts and good lunches and good dinners anyway. But I don't change my routine, but I kind of make sure I've got food on hand so I don't get hungry. That disaster for me. And I still have something sweet for morning tea. Because the minute I don't have something sweet for morning tea, and I'm talking like right now, it's like a honey prune loaf. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
This weekend, I'm going to be making lemon marshmallow slice.
I saw that.
Once I've had a little bit, and I have a good bit.
Yeah.
I'm fine. It's like, that's great. I'm good. So but just reducing my kind of serves of everything. So I'm not denying myself.
Yeah.
And it might take a little bit more time to lose weight, but it's successful.
Yeah. And I think you're right. As soon as you start going, well, I can't have this and I can't have that, it just becomes
disaster.
Yeah. And you usually don't last all that long, right?
You don't.
You just binge.
Well, you don't last long. Denial is a really, trying to think of the right word, it's powerful denial. Yeah. And I mean, it's powerful against you.
Mm.
You know, the more you deny, the more it's going to blow back on you.
Yeah. I find if I just have one little treat, homemade, wholesome, nutrient dense, high in good fats per day, I feel so like, oh yeah, I've had my treat. But if I don't have any, I'll go for a couple of days and I'll be like, no, I'm just going to have really basic meat and veg for a few days. And then I'm just like, I just want a little bit of chocolate.
and that's fine. There's nothing. This is the thing. That's not a bad thing to do.
It's not.
What trying to lose weight too, and I'm not a losing weight guru, but when it comes to sweetness, it's like trying to do it too fast or too much denial. It's going to blow back on you. You know? So I think with diabetes, slightly different. I think really rather it's a reappraisal of your foundational approach to eating is my personal feeling. about that. And if I had a client in that situation, that's what I'd be doing with them. And that involves a lot of things. So I would be focusing on that sweetness straight away. I'd be looking at what's going on foundationally. And a core part of that for many people is that they don't have time. And so having time, and this is also for losing weight as well, you have to be organized. And that's why, you know, you do the meal planning, your meal planning emails and newsletters, and even on Insta, you're so good at that, you know, that it's so critical. So I do the Get Organized program for that, but it's like, once you take a look at what's going on foundationally, if you are going to change how you're eating, you've got issues with weight or diabetes or whatever, or you've got allergies or you've got intolerances or whatever. Once you get your head around what foundational issues are going on, then I think your next step is you need to tidy up or get organized. You need to get organized. And your most powerful get organizing tool is meal planning. And the more detailed that meal plan can be, the more time you'll save during the week. And the reason why I think that's your next step is because once you free up your headspace of like, oh my God, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? There's nothing there. There's nothing food on hand. So, and that's always a disaster, you know. Once you free up some time, you can start then going, okay, now I can begin to take some of that foundational stuff on board, or now I can begin to learn to cook, perhaps a nice wholesome little slice with a little bit of sweetness in it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I just finished writing something just before the podcast on tips for saving money on eating well on a budget. And one of the things I talked about was learning to enjoy cooking. And the first step is learning to make the time or find time or reorganize so that you have the time to enjoy cooking. Because if you're rushed and stressed, you're not going to enjoy it. And you're going to just like, well, I hate cooking. I've had this conversation with so many people lately. They're like, I hate cooking. I've got this friend who's living here for a little while, and I said to her, when you go home, I'll give you one of my cookbooks. She goes, oh no, I don't cook. I'm like, well, you know, if you just maybe try a few of the recipes, they're really simple. And she's like, I don't have time to cook. And I'm like, well, that's what it is. It's the time. I said, you just got to find some time in your week that you can carve out, that you can go, right, this is my focused cooking time. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to put on some music. I'm going to have a nice, tidy kitchen. I'm going to have a plan, and I'm going to get in there and enjoy it, preferably with someone else if you can, like friends or kids or something. And she's like, yeah, you're right. It's all about the rush, the constant rush. I don't enjoy it because I'm always in a rush.
And I just think that's so true. It's like just so true. But the thing is, like, I think again, it's this kind of magic bullet kind of approach that society that we have. We're looking for quick fixes, whereas ultimately, cooking from scratch and all those other core whole food principles are they're foundational core principles for a reason. Is because you're building a strong foundation, and you can only have a house stand or your health or your family's health or society and community's health stand on foundations. You know, it doesn't matter what you're building, you need strong foundations. And I think, again, Michael Pollan, who I love, in his book Cooked, he's got a beautiful quote. Or he might have been quoting Wendell Berry, I think, the American agrarianist. I think that's the right word to describe it, where he says, what else is there more important than cooking or building the bodies of those you love? Kind of something like that, and looking after that. And
I love it.
I think this is so true. I also think and you see a lot of kind of spiritual or help guides talk about this, but in Get Organized, we have a chapter in there where it's like, what really matters. And I think at regular intervals in your life, you need to stop and work out what matters to you so you can work out where you're going. So let's just say I'm in Perth and I set out to drive to Sydney, but I'm not looking at my map of where I want to go, and I might just start veering off just a very little bit. And if I keep on going in that direction without checking in, I'm going to probably end up there with you, which would be fine.
Which would be nice.
I haven't gone where it mattered to me. So
Yeah.
I think that at certain regular intervals in your life, you want to work out what matters, and I have a range of questions that help you do that. And then what is not serving you, so what are you doing that is filling your time that is not serving you or your family or those that you love, or you don't believe in, or is not matching what matters to you? And I think that helps not only free up time, but I think it helps to a deeper sense of, I guess you could say, a more authentic way of living your life, one that makes you a little bit happier, for want of a better word. And I think that's a really big aspect in all of this. And these are the things that I would talk about for people that want to lose weight. Are like, if we ask people to change, we have to be able to free up space for them to have time to take on board learning new skills. And cooking is a learnt skill.
Yep.
Understanding, it's like when they go shopping, they're like, it's no wonder they've hit with so much marketing about, sugar's evil, coconut palm sugar is the, returning Messiah. And it's great. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the one and only. Or the Latenko or sugar alcohol, because it's not sugar. And it's not, I was going to say it's not their fault. That's not actually right, because there's never fault. It's that we're just so bombarded. Life is so hectic. It's so chaotic. We have to help create that space for them to learn what and why and how. And then the changes start happening.
Totally agree. We do the same in our program for gut health.
That's such a great program, Jo.
The whole first week is all about that. Knowing the why, working out which direction you need to go and want to go, and carving out the space in your life for those changes, because you can't do it do it in chaos.
You can't.
You've got to calm things down. You got to. It's like you can't heal when your nervous system is like. You've got to calm that nervous system down. You can't learn new skills until you've calmed your brain down enough to fit new skills, if that makes sense.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So with the chemical sweeteners that you touched on just a little bit, so I see this a lot. People will take a recipe of mine where I've used beautiful whole food sweeteners like honey or dates or coconut sugar, and even Rapadura, and people will say, well, that recipe is not very healthy because you've used sweeteners. I changed it to xylitol, erythritol, whatever toll. And then they'll share that with their community and say, now this is a good recipe. And I'm just like, no. So, yeah.
I think it comes back to the education thing, Jo. It's like, yes, you can go through and explain to them that you can give them, there was some great stuff on Western Price.
Actually, there is.
About the sugar alcohols and stuff like that. But the thing is, it's a broader, you can give them that, but sometimes that doesn't really make an indentation, because it's the broader discussion of what is healthful. It's the broader discussion of how how foods are produced. You know, it's a broader discussion of your body can only understand. It's for example, better way of describing it is, so I've got a Mac, I've got to have Word on it, you know, a Microsoft Word. So I have to have that, just, you know, PowerPoint, you just have to have it.
Yeah.
I trot down to the shop and I get Microsoft Word, bring it back, put it on, doesn't work. And I don't go, oh my God, I'm Microsoft intolerant, or I'm allergic to Microsoft. I go, oh my God, I've got the wrong one. I've got Microsoft for a PC, not Microsoft for Mac. And it's this broad conversation that, or this part of the broad conversation that's missing, that a human body cannot understand or utilize appropriately what is not real.
Yeah.
And we come into a whole anthroposophical discussion upon what is real. And Thomas Cowan does that really well, an MD. He's since resigned from the medical profession because they absolutely hammered him over COVID. And he talks, you know, like, this is your body's physical and spiritual. It understands what's real. It doesn't understand what's manipulated by man. Like, it doesn't understand homogenized, low-fat milk.
Yeah.
It can't use it. It's why so many people are intolerant to it, because it doesn't understand it. It doesn't work in the way the body has designed to handle dairy milk in those cultures that have grown up with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with this. It's like, you can have that conversation and say, well, look, it's going to draw liquid into your gut. It's not digested in the gut. It's going to imbalance other nutrients and minerals in your body. And you're going to probably end up with a lot of cramping in your stomach and anal leakage. And you can go through that but it's not going to impact because there's not an understanding.
Foundations aren't
I
there.
personally think you're better off in building the education of that more foundational issues,
of those principles, those whole food principles. Yeah. It's like, I've heard this example before, when they're checking if money is real, or like notes are real, or they're forged. It's forged, is that the word?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fraudulent. Yeah. They get the people that are checking notes to handle a lot of real notes until they're so good at telling what's real that as soon as they see a fake one, they know it straight away. Yeah. And if you train yourself to know what's real and you know what your body needs, as soon as you see a fake one, you're like, that's not right. You know what I mean?
That's very true. But I would say just monk fruit is another one. That's, I think, another sweetener. Look, I'm a big fan of traditional.
Yeah.
What has been used, and this is part of food culture, what has been used traditionally, you know, and in for building wholesome and healthy bodies. And there's a wide range of sweeteners that have been used to do that. And when you veer away from that, you know, it's not going to bode well.
Yeah. We go into unknown territory.
We do. And the body knows, you know, the body knows. But I think what you brought up is and what that kind of readership brings up is the really interesting aspect of what's going on in society, again, is that health or wholesome or nourishing is wildly fractionalized now.
Yeah.
You know, the raw food movement did a whole lot to help that fractionalization. And the vegan movement is definitely, you know, there these days. But no one takes the time to look at what makes this thing bad, and what makes the thing I'm going to replace it with healthy.
Yeah.
And that takes time and consideration and an openness.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you are with and me with, we're working on it in a foundational arena. And once we can get more of that to people, that's when they can begin to change. But you are in a highly fractionalized environment.
Yeah.
And getting worse.
Yeah.
Actually.
Very
it's
much.
not getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for just really, I think we were talking about this before we started the podcast, before we started recording, about when I am posting on social media or sharing my thoughts on my blogs, I'm not a scientist or a nutritionist, or I'm showing how to do things practically and what I've learned from my own observation and what I've seen human beings thriving on in different cultures and throughout history from my research and things like that. And I can share that and be confident in that and know that those principles, those whole food principles work. They've worked for my family. They've worked for me. They've worked for everybody who applies them. And I may not be able to explain to you all the scientific details of why a certain chemical sweetener is not amazing for you, but I can say, just come back to the principles. Has it been used for thousands of years and really benefited humans in their diet? Is it something you can make at home, or at least, somebody could make at home? Is it something that we know has nutrients that the body can absorb and use? Is it close to nature? And just get people to think that through for themselves. And then so many things just become clear, and you don't need a science degree to figure it out.
I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think, again, that's that idea of Michael Pollan talking about nutritionalism. It's like what you were talking about. That is food culture. That is the wisdoms that have been handed down for generations that have got humans to where we are today.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what's been lost with this marked, well, actually, it's not even science.
No, that's true.
I was going to say, because the xylitol thing, I don't know about the Latenko or something like that, or agave. I didn't mention agave because it's not something I use.
Same. Which
are very new and novel ingredients that couldn't happen unless there were high-tech factories.
Yeah, right.
And what do you call them? And laboratories. Okay? And what was I going to say there? So it's not even, I was going to say Michael Pollan talks about, like learning to trust the scientists. In fact, in that book, I can't remember which one, it's certainly not Cooked, it was before that, In Defense of Food, I think.
Yep.
He talks a lot about this issue of nutritionalism, where traditional wisdom being passed down was absolutely propagandized. It was absolutely destroyed consciously. So in the promotion of the trust the science. Yeah. But the science, as he is saying, unfortunately, is very much just basically science so that they can sell a product to you and make money out of it. And so even the science that that some of these extreme paradigms of eating, and I include in them raw, I include in them paleo, I include in them vegan, they can't even justify, they can't even justify with science that it works, and I think it's really interesting to see that there are people from those paradigms that have turned against those paradigms as well now these days.
Yeah. And sometimes you may need to have a strict diet for a short time for healing. And you're the first one to say that, because Jude was the one that first recommended GAPS to us when we were so unwell. And that was for a time. And then we eased back into the much wider whole foods than we could have before GAPS, because we healed. And that's different than just,
I think that's really important. I mean, there's nothing. I enjoy dairy-free and animal-free food every now, quite often, actually.
There's meals and things that you make like that,
But it's not something as a paradigm for eating.
Yeah, it's not the end all and be all.
And I think that when I talk about paleo, I think there are times you don't want to be eating carbohydrate. But I'm sorry, a paleo man was not flying in almonds and Brazil nuts and pistachios and coconut oil and coconut palm sugar to make his diet to eat. You know, he would have eaten whatever he could have got hold of, including grain.
And much simpler.
And much simpler. Yeah. But there are times you want to be eating in a more, I guess, paleo way. And also seasonality has a huge part to do with it as well.
It does, yeah.
Very different in sin. That's this seasonality, eating in season is really a core whole food principle too.
Yeah. So it just keeps coming back to context, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah,
and
really.
Sweeteners, when we're talking about sweeteners, if you're trying to lose weight, or if you are diabetic, or if you just want to cut down on sugars, having dessert as a treat and not an everyday thing, or reducing sweeteners in recipes and things like that, they all help. And it doesn't mean you have to go to a non-sugar, a chemical sweetener.
But you know, there's another little aspect to that as well.
Yeah.
And it's something that I talk about in Get Organised, and it's this joy and deliciousness and nutrients in their own right. So when I'm meal planning in my week, I have power basics, and then I have meal categories, because if I can categorize something from a whole lot of things to a smaller group of things, that works for me. But one of those categories is called feeding the love meal. And feeding the love meal is the meal that you like, lasagna or moussaka or chicken and leek pie, you know, that take more time to prepare, but you love, and they satiate you on a very different level. And when you have got that in your week, and I'm a big fan of building up in the freezer, making twice, you know, making blah, blah, all of that. But when you have got that in your week, it's a very different week.
Yeah, it's something to look forward to for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's this broad concept of joy and deliciousness and nutrients in their own right. Might not always be sweet. And maybe you might be a person that if you're losing weight or if you're diabetic, that if you got those things in your week that you love, or at least somewhere in your week, you might be okay without sweetness. But for me, I like something sweet. That's very much along my kind of Ayurvedic kind of type. I like something a bit sweet. And I'm better when I have that, and I can lose weight and still have that little bit. Yeah.
No, it does. It makes sense. It's looking at the big picture and having that balanced viewpoint, I think, makes a huge difference.
I think, and if I could encourage your listeners, the thing, and I know that you do this too, so I think we're both very much on that same path, is that focus on your foundational principles.
Yes.
That really can right a ship fairly quickly.
Yeah, I agree, totally. If anyone wants to have a look at the foundational principles, do you have them on your website somewhere, the ones that you've written out? I feel like I've read them somewhere on your...
Yeah, I've got a manifesto.
That's right.
But I'm just thinking where it is. And the only place where it is at the moment, actually, is when you subscribe to my newsletter, which is just on the home front. So
I can put the link in the notes.
Okay, so when I send out monthly.
I'm a bit like that too.
It just gets a bit full on sometimes.
It does.
And someone said to me, "Your dispatches are too long, Jude."
Yeah, that's my problem. I make them so long because I'm trying to catch up because I can't keep up with them. I do the same thing. We are so similar.
But and so I send out a few. In fact, you get one when you sign up, you get 4 emails and giving you whole food principles,
Mhm.
basic recipe with a why, a what, and a why about that recipe. So, and you can download manifesto, and there's also a link to a video as well. So that's
Wow.
probably the easiest.
That sounds good. All right, we'll get the link for that and put that below. And also for your latest baking course, whole food baking.
Oh,
Can you tell us quickly about that?
Or till next year.
Next year. Okay.
It's bigger than Ben-Hur.
Oh my goodness, I can imagine. I've been to one of your 4-day courses and there was so much packed into that. I guess it's bigger, a lot bigger than that.
It is. It's a lot bigger than that. There's 2 really big classes online. There's a few classes, but the homemade pantry that I do with Holly, we'll be doing that in February.
Oh, exciting.
And yeah, that's a big class, really good fat.
Is that one fermenting and preserving as well? Yeah.
Not preserving. I'm doing preserving in November.
November.
Do that live round. Whole food baking. So it's really, it's all your whole basic ingredients. It's your basic techniques, because they're really critical when it comes to conversion. Why this class has got so big is because I'm going into conversion in a big way as well. Yeah, because people always wanting to know how to convert. So it's conversion in a long way, and
it makes every recipe writing take twice as long, but it's twice as useful.
Exactly. So I was hoping to have it out this year, but it's just not going to happen. And I'm beyond stressing myself.
Good.
So I'm
rest.
Like, okay, I think it will be, so I'm shooting for probably May next year.
Yeah.
It'll be the second one I do now, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
So definitely go and follow Jude on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you are.
When I post, I'm very sketchy.
Yeah, but when she does post, it's going to make you hungry. I just warn you. Lots of great ideas, and definitely have a look at her cookbooks because they are wonderful. And I realized I've lent one of mine out to someone and I need to figure out who it is and get it back.
You need little books, don't you, to write down things?
I know. My dad always used to do that, write it in there. But I will have to find it because I was looking for my whole food baking book to show someone. I was like, oh no, I've lent it out. But yeah, they're just such well, you are such a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. It was so good to catch up and chat. It's been ages.
It's been ages, and it's
I know.
I don't know, I blink these days and like weeks have gone by.
Months.
Lovely, Jo. It's just lovely, lovely to be here. And it's been so lovely to be here with each and every one of you that's listening as well.
Yes, thank you guys.
Yeah.
So nice.
Wonderful team, not team, but wonderful listeners going on there, Jo.
Community, it is.
That's the word I was looking for.
That's the word.
All right.
But maybe if they want to ask you anything, is it good to go onto your social media? Is that good?
No, I'm hopeless with social media. Seriously, I am. You can, and I will.
It might take a while.
Sometimes easier to just email me.
Yeah, and that's through your website.
On my website, there's a contact, much easier just to do that. I'm in email and on my computer every day.
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook, not so much.
Well, that's probably a good thing. Well, thank you, Jude. We love you so much. We're so happy that we have you to tell us all these wonderful tidbits, and just I've learned so much from you over the years. So thank you.
Sharing the love, Jo, is what we're doing.
We're
sharing love. and ultimately, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Jo. Big hug to you.
You too.
Bye.
Mwah.